Today we're creating a pretty chill but multifaceted quest for a peaceful farming town. This quest would have our standard choosing of sides, multiple available approaches to complete it, and caters to a variety of playstyles. Before we started working on the quest though, we needed to figure out the vibe of the town that it's set in.
And I guess one of the questions we can ask ourselves is like, what sort of energy do we want this town to have? What do we want this sort of town's gambit to be, right? Do we want it to be run by like sort of an oligarchical group, or maybe there's like a very good and successful farmer in this town who sort of like runs it very fastidiously. What is the energy that we're going for in this town? Who's the leader? Who are the prominent individuals? These are questions that we sort of need to be asking ourselves.
Off this, we'd discuss the town being more insular and less involved with the greater politics of the world. But we need to consider this truth in the context of our world map and the lore of our sandbox campaign.
Because if this is the main city right here, it would make sense that this place maybe has a bit more communication or connection to the main city. But maybe they don't. Maybe they're like actively reserving themselves out of it. And when it comes to a quest, we can lean on that. And I really like factionalism quests where there's two sort of sides and you're sort of picking a side rather than just sort of somebody asks you to do something and then you go and do it. And I think something that we could have here is like maybe a bit of the quest is like you have a group who want to stay out of the discourse. Maybe these are the people in charge, right? And they're preventing people from maybe like leaving or getting too like active in sort of the rest of the business of Antiquenia. And there's maybe sort of like a younger, more active group that are saying like, no, we need to intervene, we need to get involved. Something like that.
This would become the core dynamic of the quest, getting involved with the great issues of the nation or staying out of it. However, I wanted to lean away from the classic dynamic of younger, more progressive members pushing for change, and the older current power holders rejecting it. It's a good trope, I've used it before and will use it again, but in this case, I wanted to change it up. Ironically, later in the quest, I kind of lean into it anyway, but at this point, I wasn't intending to do that.
Ooh, something that could be interesting, because I think maybe the idea of them like both being like wanting to stay as a small farming community could be good, right? But instead they have different perceptions or where they need to prioritize their resources. So maybe one group can actually be wanting to prioritize their resources to building a wall. And they're like, hey, assembly line, these guys, they've already started getting railroads. They're like spreading out. They're coming closer and closer. They already have taken out Magasan. They're moving into the ever seasons. Like they are coming and they will kill us. Like we are way too small. And if we just continue with our farming ways, we're going to die. So we need to actually start to build some defenses, and maybe we need to like militarize. And another group can be like, hey, we're peaceful, we're kind, we don't deal with like violence. And I think maybe that's a bit of a different twist on it. Maybe not a twist on it, but a different angle on it.
Gata, the legend they are, would take this idea and run, providing a slew of great reasoning and lore which we'd build off. The key among these being that the nation of Antiquenia are asking towns for war supplies, specifically grain. In return, Antiquenia will provide materials to build walls, weapons to arm the citizens, and officers to come in and train them. All in all, militarizing the town for an upcoming invasion they are very likely to lose. Small lore note here, a nation called the Assembly Line has already entirely annexed Antiquenia's closest ally, Magasan, something they achieved due to their recent industrialization. And the last few decades after this conquest has seen their technological development erupt even further. The previously much more powerful nation of Antiquenia now sits politically disjointed and technologically, comparatively, inept. And now, general wisdom says a TLA invasion is likely to happen any year. The question is then, if both groups believe in and hold small town isolationist values, why would one be willing to give grain for the war effort and the other wouldn't?
One of the newer families, they can maybe have an experience where it's like they're more linked to Magasan and they've seen that like their relatives or their families or maybe their business or something like that has been taken over by the assembly line. And it can be a bit of a situation where it's like, the type of thing where the old family are like, look, we don't want the war. We think the war is bad, but like it's not personally affecting us. Like, and that's sort of like ignorance of like, well, until it affects me, I'm not going to act. And I think that could be like a little bit of a different dynamic where it's like these groups are much more conservative in their thinking. And one is just like, hey, until it affects me, I don't care. And the other still thinks that, but they have been affected, so now they care. That could be a bit of like an interesting way to characterize this sort of like kind of collective. Because I think it could be very easy to have a group where it's like, we like to do the things we do and we aren't going to change it for anybody. And then another group that's like, you're old and you don't see the truth. And I like those dynamics is something I've done a lot, but I like to try to sort of change up the dynamics that they have, right? Not everything is just like conservative versus progressive, right? It can be fun to play around with like, in this case, like two forms of conservatism just at sort of different points of their journey.
We'd also name the two families the Copperhearths and the Kaplans. All of this left us in a great place as far as backstory, lore, motives, but we lacked a real quest for the party to go on, which we wouldn't quite crack, but we were getting closer.
The Copperhearths have had their business destroyed, right? They did a lot of business with Magasan, so they don't have a lot of the farming resources, but they're still giving what they can. But Antiquenia is like, you're not hitting the quota that we need you to hit. Kaplans, being the second biggest, or the biggest group by far, need to like actively give their stuff. And they're like, hey, if you want to give your farming resources, if you want to give your crops, you can do that, but we're not going to. But because they're not doing that, they don't have enough materials to sort of hit the quota to get the military resources. So the party need to do something to convince Kaplans to make them give the food. And I think what we can have off that is like one of the members of the Copperhearths hires the party to convince them.
This was a good blueprint, but it was time to dedicatedly figure out who the quest giver could be.
Who's going to be the individual that gives the party the quest? And the obvious answer is like the head of that group, right? The head of that family. But I think we can do something a little bit differently, where I think we could maybe have this be like a lower level member of the family who is much more passionate about the need to get militarized, the need to get sort of the resources, and maybe the tops of the families, like they want it, but they're not going to do anything to like push the Kaplans to do it. Like the heads of the Copperhearths don't care enough or aren't interested enough. Or don't feel like they have the power to do it. So it's like a younger member who's a little bit going rogue.
We go to our old friend NPC generator to give us some extra information we could build off.
A Hill Dwarf Cleric 156. Okay. So all of a sudden, the Copperhearths are dwarfs, which makes sense. It makes sense that they're even more conservative. It makes sense that they have that sense of isolationist, especially if we're saying this is like a younger member of the family. 156. Obviously, comparatively pretty old, right? So maybe everyone in this town is dwarfs. Flaw, my piety sometimes lead me to blindly trust those profess faith in God. Ooh, so they could be very like zealot. They could be a very like intense zealot, and maybe like they think they've had like a divine experience, or divine providence is saying that this is a necessity and that's why they believe in it so fervently. Maybe we could lean on that a little bit.
It was now time to take some of the avenues the players can take to complete this quest and flesh them out. To start off with, we'd look at the favor the party can do for the leader of the Kaplans.
What can the Kaplans ask? And I think maybe it could be something to do with the forest. We could send them to the forest to do something fun there. Let's say every decade, the head of the family needs to venture into this forest and kill, a monster of some kind. But the particular head of the family, they're getting old. And most people think they're probably not able to do it. They're old, they're a little bit decrepit, and it's going to be too much for them. And what they can do as like a favor is they can actually go in with the party to kill the monster. And then like the party who, will like meet them in the forest or whatever, will like disappear, and then they can be like, I still have my strength, I still have my power, I'm still able to kill this enemy, I get to maintain my position as head of the family for another 10 years. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because it's like, if, the Kaplans, why are they going against their sort of social isolationist beliefs? And I think the reason of like, so the head of the family can maintain another 10 years as the head of the family, singular, isolated, self-centered corruption leads to like devaluing of an entire like group's value systems. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So I feel great about that. I feel super awesome about that.
This monster killing would naturally lead into how the party can easily and naturally off this leader without drawing any attention to themselves.
How are we gonna do murdering the head of the family? I think, okay, let's connect the two ideas together. They agree to do the favor, and then while they're doing the favor, they murder the head. The head of the people is supposed to go fight a monster that most people think they can't beat already. So that's like a perfect open opportunity to smack them on the head, kill them, and then leave. And nobody knows that the party is with the head anyway. They're supposed to be going in solo. They've covertly met them in the forest in secret. So I think that links super, super nicely. Combines these two together. So they can murder the head of the family, putting a weaker member in charge.
This was a really good base for our three options, the first being diplomatic or threats, basically anything conversation related. We didn't write or plan anything here because these situations are based entirely on what the party say and do. To me, being open to this resolution and being responsive during the sessions is all the planning you need. Then option 2 of kill the monster on the behalf of the Kaplans leader, with option 3 being kill them on behalf of Hlyn. So we were onto the idea of how the party side with the Kaplans over siding with Hlyn, the original quest giver. We ended up going simple. More or less, the head of the Kaplans asked the party to tell Hlyn that they know of their plan to interfere with the dynamic of the town, going against the wishes of both families. In this, they give Hlyn an ultimatum. Stop trying to recruit people to convince them to give them grain or to straight up kill them, come back to the town and just chill. If Hlyn doesn't do this, they'll tell the Copperhearths what they're doing, which will result in Hlyn being ostracized and altogether cut off, which for Hlyn is too much of a threat to continue and will result in them giving up on their goals. The party will also be offered twice the reward Hlyn can offer as an incentive to make them take this deal. I didn't want to go crazy in depth with this quest. My goal was very much create a solid structure which had a few interesting avenues and options the party could engage with. This Definitely Not Chaos would make an awesome suggestion where the party need to steal information from the Copperhearths on behalf of the Kaplans, but this would be a fairly big addition, probably requiring us to make some sort of stealth maps where the party can creep around and get that information. And as a DM, it's good to know how to keep things simple sometimes. How not to overexpand the quest in the planning phase, have a few options, then let the session add the complexity. And while I think this would be great and is really smart and fits in with the dynamic of the quest, I decided against it in the name of having an easier to create quest. This left us with one area we needed to cap off, figuring out the battle encounter when the party go to kill the monster they need to do for the Kaplan favor.
Okay, so I've just sort of blasted into this. What monster do we want to have? An owlbear could be good. An owlbear definitely could be good. I think it definitely goes into the forest theme. And I think owlbear is also like, it's probably not too intense of a monster, you know? Like, because this is just like a bunch of fucking farmers. So it's like, why would they be able to like slay like a dragon? Like, they're not going to be doing that. An owlbear, difficult to kill, probably the level of like a pretty strong regular NPC could take, right?
I created an entire video on how we ended up making our owlbear battle map, and it's pretty good. If I do say so myself, which I do, it's pretty good. This would bring us to the end of the quest making. This session should be great for more low-key classic fantasy campaign stuff. Plenty of space for roleplay, a bunch of optionality for the party, but still clear through lines to guide them. Plus, I'm really happy with the lore for the town and the families, as well as the rationales and philosophies we created for the characters. It should lead to some great in-depth discussion between the players about what they believe in and how they want to approach enacting and achieving those beliefs. And that's the video. If you have beliefs you want to enact, then subscribe to the channel. Also check out the other content to further implement your ideologies into practice. Swindle onto the Patreon to support the channel, where you'll also get access to all the maps I've ever created, the quest modules I've created, including this one. And thank you so much to everyone who has already done that. I really genuinely appreciate it so much. Join the Twitch to effect these quests live. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Bye!